Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Cleaner. I have to make up Federalist paper reading today as I did last week. So today's reading will be number 55. Number 55 by James Madison. The number of which the House of Representatives is to consist forms another and a very what? The number of which the House of Representatives is to consist forms is to consist forms another and a very interesting point of view under which this branch of the federal legislature may be contemplated. Scarce an article, indeed, in the whole Constitution seems to be rendered more worthy of attention by the weight of character and the apparent force of argument with which it has been assailed. The charges exhibited against it are, at first, that so small a number of representatives will be an unsafe depository of the public interests. Second, that they will not possess a proper knowledge of the local circumstances of their numerous constituents. And third, that they will be taken from that class of citizens which will sympathize least with the feelings of the mass of the people and be most likely to aim at a permanent elevation of a few on depression of the many. Four, that defective as the number will be in the first instance, it will be more and more disproportionate by the increase of the people and the obstacles which will prevent a corresponding increase of the representatives. In general, it may be remarked on this subject that no political problem is less susceptible of a precise solution than that which relates to the number most convenient for a representative legislature. Nor is there any point on which the policy of the several states is more at variance, whether we compare the legislative assemblies directly with each other or consider the proportions which they respectively bear to the number of their constituents. Passing over the difference between the smallest and largest states is Delaware, whose most numerous branch consists of 21 representatives, in Massachusetts, where it amounts to between 3 and 400 representatives. A very considerable difference is observable among states nearly equal in population. The number of representatives in Pennsylvania is not more than one-fifth of that in the state last mentioned. New York, whose population is that of South Carolina at 65, has little more than one-third of the number of representatives. As great a disparity prevails between the states of Georgia and Delaware or Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, as great a disparity prevails between the states of Georgia and Delaware or Rhode Island. In Pennsylvania, the representatives do not bear a greater proportion to the constituents than that of one for every 4 or 5,000. In Rhode Island, they bear a proportion of at least one. And according to the Constitution of Georgia, the proportion may be carried to one to every 10 electors and must unavoidably far exceed the proportion of any of the states. Another general remark to be made is that the ratio between the representatives and the people ought not to be the same where the latter are very numerous as where they are few. Were the representatives in Virginia to be regulated by the standard in Rhode Island, they would, at this time, amount to between 400 and 500 in 20 and 30 years hence. On the other hand, the ratio of Pennsylvania, if applied to the state of Delaware, would reduce the representative assembly of the latter to 7 or 8 members. Nothing can be more fallacious than to found our political calculations on arithmetical, arithmetical principles. 60 or 70 men may be more commonly trusted with a given degree of power than 6 or 7. but it does not follow that 6 or 700 would be proportionately a better depositor. depository. And if we compare on the supposition to 6 or 7,000, the whole reasoning ought to be reversed. The truth is that in all cases, a certain number at least seems to be necessary to secure the benefits of free constitution and discussion, and to guard against too easy condemnation for improper purposes. As, on the other hand, the number ought at most be kept within a certain limit in order to avoid the confusion and intemperance of a multitude. In all very numerous assemblies of whatever characters composed, passion never fails to wrest the scepter from reason. Had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, every Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. It is necessary also to recollect here the observations which were applied to the case of biennial elections. For the same reason that the limited powers of the Congress and the control of the state legislatures justify less frequent elections than the public safety might otherwise require, the members of the Congress need to be less numerous than if they possess the whole power of legislation, were under no other than the ordinary constraints of other legislative bodies. With these general ideas in our minds, let us weigh the objections which have been stated against the number of members proposed for the House of Representatives. It is said, in the first place, that so small a number cannot be safely trusted with Senate. I agree. The number which this branch of the legislature is to consist at the outset of the government will be 65. Within 3 years, a census is to be taken, and the number may be augmented to 1 for every 10,000 inhabitants. And within every successive period of 20 years, the census is to be renewed, and augmentations may continue to be made under the condition. It will not be thought an extravagant conjecture that the first census will, at the rate of 1 for every 30,000, raise the number of representatives to at least 100. Estimating the Negroes in proportion to 3/5, it can scarcely be doubted that the population of the United States will, by that time, if it does not already, amount to 3 million. At the expiration of 25 years, according to the computed rate of increase, the number of representatives will amount to 200, and at 50 years to 400. This is a number which I presume will put an end to all fears arising from the smallness of the body. I take for granted here what I shall, in answering the fourth question, hereafter show that the number of representatives will be augmented from time to time in the manner provided by the Constitution. On the contrary supposition, I should admit the objection to have very good weight indeed. The true question to be decided then is whether the smallness of the number, its temporary regulation, be dangerous to the public. Whether 65 members for 2 years and 100 or 200 for 3 more be a safe depository, or limited and well by the power of legislation. I must own that I cannot give a negative answer to this question without first obliterating every impression which I have received with regard to the present genius of the people of America, the spirit which actuates the state legislature, and the principles which are incorporated in the political character of every constitution. I am unable to conceive that the people of America, in their present temper, or under any circumstances which can speedily will choose in every second year to 65 of 100 men who will be disposed to form and pursue a scheme of tyranny and terror. I am unable to conceive that the state legislature which must feel so many motives to watch and which possess so many means of forming a federal legislature would fail either to detect or to defeat a conspiracy of the latter against the liberties of the economy. I am equally unable to conceive that they are at this time, or can be in any short time, in the United States, any 65 or 100 men capable of recommending themselves with choice of the people at large, who would either desire or dare, within the short space of 2 years, to betray the solemn trust in the what change of circumstances time, and the further population of our country may produce, requires a prophetic spirit to prepare, which makes no part of my pretensions. But judging from the circumstances now before us, and from the probable state of them within a moderate period of time, I must pronounce that the liberties of America cannot be understood in the number of hands components that affect the Constitution. From what quarter can we begin? Are we afraid of foreign gold? If foreign gold could so easily corrupt our federal rulers and to ensnare and betray the country. How was it happen that we are at this time a free and independent? The Congress which conducted us through the revolution was a less numerous body than its successors. They were not chosen by nor responsible to the fellow citizens at large, though appointed from year to year and tolerable at pleasure. They were generally continued for 3 years, and prior to the ratification of the federal ordinance, for still longer. They held the consultations always under the veil of secrecy, at the sole transaction of our affairs with foreign nations. Through the whole course of the war, they had the fate of the country more in their hands than the hope will ever be the case for our future. And from the greatness of the prize at stake, and the eagerness of the party which he lost, it may well be supposed that the use of other means than force will not have been obstructed or scrupled. Yet we know by happy experience that the public trust was not betrayed, nor has the purity of our public conscience in this particular ever suffered, even from the whispers of calumny. Is the danger apprehended from the other branches of the federal government? For where are the means to be found by the President or the Senate or both? Their emoluments of office, which should be presumed will not, and without a previous corruption of the House of Reps, cannot, will not, and cannot more than suffice for very different purposes, without the fortunes, as they must all be American citizens cannot possibly be served. The only means then which they can possess will be the dispensation of appointments. Is it here that suspicion rests their charge? Sometimes we are told that this fund of corruption is to be exhausted by the president and subdued the virtue of the Senate. Now the vitality of the House or the other houses to be within. The improbability of such a mercenary and perfidious combination of the several members of government, standing on as different foundations as Republican principles, will well admit, and at the same time accountable to the society over which they are placed, ought alone to quiet this apprehension. But fortunately, the Constitution has provided a still further safeguard. The members of the Congress are rendered ineligible to any civil offices that may be or of which the emoluments may be increased during the terms of their election. No offices therefore can be dealt out of the existing members, but such as may become vacant by ordinary president. And to suppose that these would be sufficient to purchase the audience of the people, selected by the people themselves, is to renounce every rule of its events ought to be calculated, and to substitute an indiscriminate and unbounded jealousy, with which all reasoning must be done. The sincere friends of liberty, who gave themselves up to the extravagancies of this pageant are not aware of the injury they do their own cause. As there is a degree of depravity in mankind which requires a certain degree of circumspection and distrust, so there are other qualities in human nature which justify a certain portion of esteem and confidence. The public and government presupposes the existence of these qualities in a higher degree than any other kind. Were the pictures which have been drawn by the political jealousy of some among us faithful likenesses of the human character, the influence will be that there is not sufficient virtue among men for self-government, and that nothing less than the change of despotism can restrain them from destroying and devouring. Number 55. Number 56 will also be by this. I hope you enjoyed it. This will be, of course, with the playlist reading the Federalist papers. And I will see you next time.